Thank you for joining us for EMBCA's Historic Legacy and Heritage of Greek Jews panel discussion. My name is Lou Katsos, EMBCA's president, and I will moderate today's discussion. Our distinguished panel includes Dr. Mimi Cohen, Marcia Haddad Ikonomopoulos, the museum director of Kehila, Kedosha, and the president of the Association of Friends of Greek Jewry. Author Dr. Stephen Bowman, Professor Emeritus of the University of Cincinnati, and educator community leader Peter Stavrianidis, PhD. The historic heritage and legacy of Greek Jews weave a rich tapestry of cultural, economic, and intellectual contributions within the broader narrative of Hellenic history. Spanning centuries, this legacy reflects both moments of harmonious coexistence and periods of challenges, highlighting the resilience of a community deeply embedded in the Hellenic tapestry. Greek Jews can trace their roots back to ancient times, with a presence dating to ancient Hellenic, Hellenistic, and East Roman Byzantine eras. Thriving in various towns and cities, they played significant roles in commerce and cultural exchanges, contributing to the cosmopolitan character of places like Thessaloniki, among many others. The Ottoman Empire's ascendancy fostered a unique Sephardic Jewish community in Greece. Following the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492, many sought refuge in Ottoman territories, including Greece. Thessaloniki became a major center for Sephardic Jewry, evolving into a vibrant hub of cultural and intellectual exchange. The Ladino language, Judeo-Spanish Greek Jews engaged in commerce, finance, crafts, establishing a significant presence in the Ottoman Empire's economic landscape. This prosperity, however, did not shield them from adversity. The 19th century witnessed societal and political upheavals, setting the stage for the emergence of modern Greece with the Hellenic War of Independence, marked in a turning point. Greek Jews embedded in the struggle for autonomy faced dilemmas of loyalty and identity. Some actively participated in the revolutionary cause, aligning with their fellow Greeks against the Ottoman rulers. Others, however, expressed concerns about their status in an independent Greece and at times faced reprisals and massacres, such as in Tripolitsa. The 20th century brought unprecedented challenges, culminating in the Holocaust during World War II. During the fascist Axis powers' invasion of Greece, starting on October 28th of 1940, approximately 13,000 Greek Jews fought in the Hellenic army, including well-known and decorated Colonel Mordecai Frizis, fighting in a force which successfully repelled the invading Italian army. The eventual Nazi occupation of Greece and Holocaust, however, resulted in the horrific devastation and murder of approximately 87% of Greek Jews, and the vibrant Hellenic Jewish presence in cities like Thessaloniki and Yanina, among others, became decimated. For example, Thessaloniki, historically a center of Jewish life, underwent profound changes. The once thriving Jewish quarter was forever altered, and the city's demographics shifted. Yesterday, importantly, was the 79th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz on January 27th, now an annual International Holocaust Remembrance Day, where we commemorate and honor the memory of Holocaust victims. 6 million Jews, 1/3 of the Jewish population, along with countless members of other minorities. Post-war Greece saw a rebuilding of the Jewish community, albeit on a smaller scale. The survivors, alongside Jewish immigrants, endeavored to revive their cultural and religious institutions, with Greek Jews actively contributing significantly to the Hellenic nation's recovery and development. In contemporary Greece, the legacy of Greek Jews is evident in various facets of society. Synagogues, cemetery, and cultural landmarks serve as tangible reminders of the historical interweaving of Hellenic national narratives. Efforts to preserve and commemorate this heritage have gained momentum, reflecting a collective acknowledgement of the importance of diversity within the Hellenic national identity. As Greece navigates its present and future, the contributions of the Hellenic Jewish community remain a strong, integral part of the nation's identity. The preservation and celebration of this legacy underscores the interconnections of Greek history and enduring threads of diversity which enrich the nation's tapestry in Greece itself and the diaspora, and what will also be explored in this panel discussion. We have a great group of panelists today. With the first one to make a presentation is Dr. Mimi Cohen. Dr. Cohen was born and raised in Athens after the Second World War. His parents survived the Holocaust in Athens thanks to the courage and generosity of Greek Orthodox friends. He is a recognized authority in the area and has lectured as a guest speaker on a number of universities, churches, synagogues, and other organizations on the long and largely unknown history of Greek Jews and the Holocaust. He has developed a special interest in the study of the long history of Jews in Greece, their interconnections with their Christian compatriots, their culture and traditions. He will give a presentation on the early history and interactions of the Greek and Romaniote Greek-speaking Jews, Jewish communities around the East Mediterranean, including the cross-fertilization of ideas which have had a significant and long-lasting impact on Western civilization and became the basis of our Judeo-Christian civilizations. Welcome, Mimi, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation. It is great to be a part of this big panel, and I will try to share with you some of the information, since the topic is really very wide and I can be talking for a long, long time. Let me just, okay, so you already heard that the history of the Jews in Greece is pretty much unknown, the long history, yet Jews are even mentioned, Greeks are mentioned in the Torah, in the book of Genesis, and in the table of nations in Genesis, which lists the descendants of Noah and the nations they found. The Greeks appear under the name Yavan. This is a term that is still used referring to Greeks, and it has to do with Ionia, which was the name of the coastal part of what is now Turkey. So the name Yavan is the son of Japhet. Yavan is parallel to the Greek word Ionia, as we talked about, but Japhet could be parallel with the Greek word Iapetos, who is the mythological father of Prometheus in Greek legend. Two other Greek nations appear in the table in the book of Genesis: Rhodes as Rhodanim, and Cyprus as Kition. The sons of Sem, brother to Japhet, are the Semitic, name after Shem, nations, including the Hebrews. Ham forefathered Asian Middle Eastern people, and Japhet, the Eurasian people. So in the Jewish cosmology, if you see, this is, of course, according to the Jewish history and perception, you can see where the Greeks also are descendants of one of the tribes. But this is legend. We have facts. The fact are, among others, the findings of Attic pottery in the land of Israel. And you can see in this map in how many areas they uncovered Greek pottery of the 5th century. Those are some of the Israeli museum. They came there primarily from merchants because there was a known transaction primarily with good quality wine, as some books say. And we have coins also, Attic coins of the same period. However, the first organized Jewish communities were really established in Greece around 400 BC. The communities flourished during the reign of Alexander the Great and the subsequent Hellenistic period. Jewish immigrants, but also slaves, flooded the Hellenistic cities in Asia Minor, the Aegean coast, the islands, and the mainland. Jews retained their monotheistic religion, but many wealthy Jews were attracted to the Greek culture and created a class of assimilated pro-Greek Jews. We have this incredible book that was published just a few years ago by the Jewish Museum of Greece, which includes the corpus of inscriptions that were found around Greece proper. And Jeanette Batinou, the director of the museum, did a fabulous job. This is her brainchild. We can see, therefore, a lot of inscriptions in Greek, in Hebrew, and in a mixture of languages that reflect to the presence of Greeks. There is even this inscription in Delphi in the sanctuary. But the real connection with Jews and Greeks started with Alexander the Great. There is a question mark as you see that Alexander visited Jerusalem in 334 in his way to Persia. According to Josephus, the high priest Simon Hatzadik or Jadus, he marched out of the gates to Greek Alexander and prevent him from plundering the city. Alexander, according to the legend, recognized in him the figure which had once appeared in a dream and encouraged him to wage war against the Persians. That's a part of the Babylonian Talmud. So the legend again says that Alexander knelt in front of the high priest and his friends, generals, they said, "What are you doing? You are the king." And his response was, "I'm only kneeling to what he represents." Then Alexander, according to the story, went to the temple and he asked for a statue of his to be placed in the temple. The high priest says, we don't put statues, but instead we can name our firstborns with the name Alexander. And since then, Alexander has become a Hebrew name as well and still used nowadays. All this is wonderful, but it is fake news because Alexander never visited Jerusalem, and this is all circumstantial details, pure legend that have no basis of historical fact. However, it was a good story, and it was a good story for both the Greeks and the Jews. The Jews felt that they would be protected from Alexander, and the Greeks were going to go further to Persia. Interestingly enough, the story continues. This is a mosaic from a synagogue of Hukkok in Israel, and you can see again here the high priest and Alexander and his army. And then many years later, you see again in a Greek writing, Alexander and the high priest. So the story perpetuated for the history. The truth of the matter is that there was early diaspora in addition to the first one in Mesopotamia, and wherever you see orange is the beginning of the diaspora, in what is now Greece, Asia Minor, and Egypt. This is a very important document of the presence of Jews in Greece. It was found in a sanctuary in Oropos. The interesting thing is that for the first time, it's difficult to read here, but I have enlarged it, and you can see for the first time the word Iudeos, Jew, and this is the very first time documented anywhere in history, this word Iudeos in an artifact. This now is housed temporarily in the Jewish Museum of Greece as a loan from the Greek government. So when the next time you go to Greece, go and visit it. Then there is a very nice story of Clerchos of Solis that was from Cyprus. According to Josephus, Aristotle mentioned his encounter with a Jew in Asia Minor. And he says that Jews are derived from the Indian philosophers. They are named by the Indian name Kalami and by the Syrians Judhe, and took their name from the country they inhabit, which is called Judea. But as far for the name of their city is a very awkward one, for they call it Jerusalem. And they go further and say, now this man who was a large circle of friends and was in his way from interior to the coast, not only he spoke Greek, but had the soul of a Greek. There is another story in the Maccabees about King Ares of Sparta, and Ares, king of the Lacedaemonians, to Aeneas, the high priest, greetings. It is found in writing that the Lacedaemonians and Jews are brethren, and they are stock of Abraham. Now, therefore, since this is come to our knowledge, we shall do very well to write into us of your prosperity. We do write back again to you that your cattle and goats are ours, and ours are you. The Hellenistic period is a very important part of the Judaism, and there were Alexandria was actually the main city. Jews used Greek language. They assumed Greek customs and manners. They preserved their faith, customs, and dietary rules. The literature is amazing, and the amount of books available on the topic are incredible. If you are interested, there are many, many of them. But Alexandria primarily was a prosperous Greek-speaking community and center of the Hellenistic Judaism. Greek was the language of commerce, administration, culture, and secular law. The Septuagint was translated of the Old Testament in 270 BCE during the reign of Ptolemy II or the Philadelphus. This translation helped diaspora Jews to maintain their religious roots. It's also Paul and early Christians drew some of their knowledge from this translation. Unfortunately, these were the seeds of Judeophobia, because anti-Semitism is a much modern term. And it's very interesting to listen about these issues of Judeophobia back then, and the reasons, which were, of course, had to do with the religious beliefs, the dietetic rules, social and political economic rules, and circumcision. It's very interesting because circumcision was practiced by the Egyptians way before Judaism evolved. And it's very interesting that even in the Greek Orthodox Church, the January 1st is celebrated as the day for the circumcision of Jesus. Yet this was a troubling point that followed Judaism for a long time. Jews in Palestine proper, they also became Hellenized they assumed Greek names as High Priest Jason. They used Greek language and Greek costumes, and you can see the prude shepherds from Judea changing to flashy costumes as their Greek and Roman counterparts. And art was very much influenced from Greek culture. In Delos, in the island of Delos, Jews and Samaritans started settling there about the 2nd century. According to Philo, Jews were involved in merchant marine, banks, as well as other business. The synagogue, with a big question mark, because it has not been really proven, dates from the 1st century before Common Era. And there are 4 inscriptions that were found mentioning the Ipsisto Theo, the God of Most Mighty. Some people argue that that could refer to Zeus, but then it would have said Zeus, Ipsisto Theo, not just Ipsisto Theo. This is the area which is called the synagogue in Delos, and the archaeologists conveniently call this the throne of Moses. But the important thing to remember is we knew there were Jews in this area, and if this was a synagogue, it would have been the very first synagogue in the European soil. And those are some of the dedicatory inscriptions. Philo-Judaeus of Alexandria, he was the most eminent Jewish philosopher of his era. He synthesized Platonic, Stoic, and Jewish ideas. He laid a foundation for Jewish, Christian, and Muslim natural theology. The Logos, the Word of God, mediates God's absoluteness to creation, articulating divine wisdom in nature and in human intelligence. Among others, he writes about the presence of Greeks, and he mentioned that they don't have one country, but they live in many towns and places. And in Europe, he mentions a bunch of Greek towns, like in Thessaly, in Macedonia, in Attica, in Argos, and in several islands, as in Evia, Cyprus, and Crete. Then comes Titus, who destroyed Jerusalem in the year 70. Flavius Josephus, who was a Jewish historian and chief representative of the Jewish Hellenic tradition, he wrote in a book about the antiquities of the Jews. I have undertaken the present work thinking it will appear to the Greeks worthy of their study. It will contain all our antiquities and constitution of our government as interpreted out the Hebrew scriptures, who the Jews were, what fortunes they had been subject to, and by what legislature they have been instructed in piety. Jews start moving around this time, and it is estimated that about 1/10 of the population of Eastern Mediterranean would have been of Jewish faith. Paul, in his missionary journeys, among others, he visited several places in Greece, and of course, he primarily visited the Jews in the synagogues, and he was in Philippi and in Thessaloniki and in Veria, in Athens, and Corinth. The presence of Jews in Corinth and in all the towns that Paul visited is very well documented. Specifically for Corinth, this was one of the most important ports of the Mediterranean and the center of industrial growth during the Hellenistic and early Roman period. Jews were merchants and textile colorers with purpura, which is the imperial purple. Emperor Vespasian transported several thousands. Now there is a big question mark there because the number is too big, to assist in the digging of the Corinth Canal, which was never completed. Paul visited Corinth 3 times in the years 50, 55, and 57, and we have fragments from the synagogue and the menorah of this era. And this is synagogue and the artifacts which are now in the museum in Corinth. In Athens, there were Jewish merchants with a business between Athens and coastal cities of Eastern Mediterranean. A statue of High Priest John Hyrkanos, or Cohen Gadol, was erected in Athens to thank him for the warm hospitality he offered to visiting Athenian merchants and diplomats. That's mentioned in Josephus. There were several dedicatory inscriptions found in Greek that were found in Athens, but you can, from the names, you can assume that those are Jewish names like Mathea, like Amia Hierosolimitis from Jerusalem, and Veniamis or Benjamin. Paul also preached Christianity in the Areospagos. There is a big question mark about this structure, and the only reason that it was called a structure of a synagogue was because of this find, who is also dated in the 3rd century, and you can find it in the Jewish Museum in Athens now. But we know that there were Jews in Athens, that there's no question about that. Those are some relatively newer finds. This is the synagogue in the island of Chios with beautiful mosaics, all in Greek language, and the synagogue in Aegina, and again, all in Greek language. This is Sepphoris in Israel. Again, look at the art. It's all Greek influenced. And this is the Jewish Mona Lisa. And again, in Jerusalem, Evlogia to Theo, blessing of the people, well, with all the Jewish symbols. Then came Byzantium, and since my friend Professor Bowman is here, I'm going to go very fast because he is the world expert on this period. There are many books dealing with the topic. However, the truth of the matter is we don't have very much concrete information. We know from epigraphic records, some manuscripts, traveler chronics, proses and verses, but there are no Jewish archives. There are no ruins of synagogues. They were not allowed to build new synagogues. There are no coins or seals. So the information is scattered. The truth is that the legal position of the Jews in the beginning of the Byzantine era, in 2012, Emperor Caracalla bestowed citizenship on all residents of the empire, including the Jews. Jews had the right to practice their faith as long as they paid the fiscus judaicus. Circumcision was permitted. Synagogues were recognized as place of worship. Jewish courts had the responsibility to enforce the laws, but Jews could not be forced to violate Shabbat for their festivities. Then the situation started becoming a little harder because Christianity was declared as the sole authorized religion. But Jews, because they were part of the scriptures, they were treated a little better. Theodosius created a very much stricter rule, and even worse comes Justinian and Theodora. The empire was in the skies at the time. During his time, he officially recognized Judaism as heresy. Jews may not build new synagogues, renewed laws forbidding Jews for having Christian slaves, which means they couldn't have business. Jews were excluded for government and municipal posts. Jews could not testify against Christians. He forbade Jews' language from the synagogues, as well as the reading of the Talmud and the Mishnah. So the only scriptures were read in Greek, and that led to the creation of piyutim or poems. Then came emperors that were really heavy-handed and they ordered wholesale conversion of Jews in Christianity for almost 3 centuries. This is considered as a dark age, not only because of this forced conversion, but also because we don't have very much information for the Jews. During the 10th century, the Jews were tolerated as a status of tolerate minority. Roman Jews spoke vernacular Greek in everyday life. Hebrew was re-established from the 9th century and became the language of liturgy, but also communication with Jews residing outside the empire, in particular for business purposes. Jewish communities were widely dispersed, primarily urban and along waterways and land routes. There were scholarly activities in several cities, and by the late 13th century, there was immigration from newcomers, but they all assimilate at the time in the Greek language. We know, we have information from Benjamin Dutudella and other visitors. Then Constantinople was sacked by the Crusaders, and they were really very hard on the Jews. The situation improved dramatically under the reign of the Paleologs, which was the end of the Byzantine Empire. What characterized the position of Jews during the reigns of Michael Paleologus and his son Andronicus was the remarkable degree of toleration. Andronicus, in 1319, he issued a Chrysovul, which is an imperial decree, stating that the Jews of Ioannina are to live in free and undisturbed state just as other citizens. I couldn't resist adding this slide where there were poems, and this is a poem for a wedding, and it is in Greek and in Hebrew, and it's marvelous. It's so fresh, it's like today's. Constantinople was conquered by the Ottomans in 1453. For many, the fall of Constantinople was the beginning of the fall of the world. New Rome had fallen as Jerusalem did in the past. Christians started looking for a sign of second coming of the Messiah, while Romagnol Jews started seeking for signs in the scriptures alluding to the Messianic coming. There was even a lament over the fall of the city by Michael Sabbatai Cohen Balbo from Crete, and in there, among others, he writes, "For my people is taken captive in a great captivity along with my enemy." The only prominent Jewish communities remaining after that were these in Greek Jewish communities, were in Crete. And Crete was under the Venetian rules. They were allowed to practice. They were landowners. They were exporting. They have Jewish quarters and community organizations. There were beautiful books of poetry by several Talmudic scholars and rabbis. And interestingly enough, in addition to their traditional and mystical endeavors, they encompass a wide range of themes and forms influenced by the Italian Renaissance. The poems reflect, among others, a renewed interest in Neoplatonic and Aristotelian logic. So again, you see the interaction. Then comes the expulsion and the coming of the Sepharad Jews in the Ottoman Empire. And it's said that the Sultan said, "How foolish of the monarchs of Spain who impoverish their empire while enriching my own." For the last few minutes, let me talk about Ioannina and the Romagnots. Jews inhabited Epirus from the 1st century and Ioannina since the 9th century because the city was not established before that time. They lived within the castle for centuries, but gradually create other neighborhoods around the area. Under the Ottoman Jews, they were allowed to practice their religion, They were primarily peddlers, merchants, and there were some worthy landowners and some bankers and doctors. Again, there is a lot of information about Romagnol poetry, and if you are interested, this man, Weinberger, did a great job in compiling. But one thing that is always fascinating me is Matzor Romania, which is a prayer book in Greek. And you can see the English translation. They speak about God, our Lord is one, and on and on and on. And if you are interested, go to the web, you can find the whole interesting Matzor Romania. The scrolls and the Torah is read upright in the Romagnol tradition. There are beautiful liturgical and other elements, beautiful costumes. A synagogue that's almost 200 years old, but there were synagogues before this one. There were an interesting tradition is the tradition of Aleph, which is an amulet for the newborn males, and it was supposed to be kept over the bed, the crib, for 40 days for protection. And there is a cemetery. Among them, there is an old, very old 1426 grave. There was Jewish education. These books are incredible in presenting photographic records of the last century. And we know about the Jewish life. There were primarily poor people and some rich people. They were really, most of them, poor and peddlers. But there was a wonderful poet, Joseph Elia. There's a street after his name now. And they were all celebrating many holidays. Purim was great because of Esther. It was an image. This is a picture of the preparation of the bride and all the elements that she's getting to her new home. Weddings were holidays for the entire community. When the Greek army with Prince Constantine entered Ioannina in February 1913, the Jewish quarter was all decorated and welcomed them. Going forward, March 24, 1944, there is this hydroplane that lands in Ioannina. You can see this briefcase. The man holds the decree for the Jews to be expelled from Ioannina, and the next day, day of the National Greek Day, Jews were expelled, and interestingly enough, the loss in Ioannina is higher than the average loss in Greece. It's 91%. Let me close with this man, Professor Moses Elisaf. He just died last year. He was the president of the community and mayor of Ioannina. When he became president, the synagogue was really empty, and only around the walls there were the names of all the people who perished in the Holocaust. Among them, you can see my family. But then he was able to gather Jews around Greece, Israel, Europe, and America, and be able to fill the synagogue during Yom Kippur. Holding this historic Torahs is just very special. And of course, listening to the shofar, this is the best memorial every year. So if you are available, think of coming to Yanina for Yom Kippur next year. Thank you very much.
Mimi, thank you so much for that historical presentation, because it really also highlights what other people are going to be saying. Thank you again. It was magnificent. Thank you for that. Our next presenter today, we are honored also to have Dr. Stephen Bowman. He is the Emeritus Professor of Judaic Studies at the University of Cincinnati, and an American scholar and academic particularly known for his research of Greek and Jewish relations throughout the past 3 millennia, with emphasis on Byzantine and Holocaust periods. He is the author of 80 referee journal articles and book chapters. His books include The Jews of Byzantium, 1204 to 1453, The Holocaust in Salonika, Eyewitness Accounts, Jewish Resistance in Wartime Greece, The Agony of Greek Jews, 1940 to 1945, and an annotated translation of Sefer Yosipon. Welcome, Stephen, and thank you for being with us today.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. Yesterday we celebrated the memory of the Holocaust of European Jewry, including the Jews of Greece. And today we're going to talk not only about the history of the Jews of Greece, which was amply presented by Dr. Cohen, but also the participation of the Jews in World War II in Greece, both in Greece and elsewhere, which we'll talk about, and also bring to your knowledge another 300, which belongs in Greek history, not in Thermopylae, but in Poland itself. In any event, as was mentioned, Mordechai Friezes, who was a lieutenant colonel stationed in Yanina, had prepared a plan to meet the Italian attack, which was accepted by the Greek National Command, and he succeeded after the invasion, which came about on the morning of October 28th, 1941, when the Italian ambassador woke up the Greek prime minister and tried to negotiate the right of the Italians to march through Greece. But the Italians had already, in a pre-dawn attack, had invaded Greece. In any event, Friezes led his men, which included some of the 13,000 Jews who were in the Greek army, many of them veterans of the 1921 invasion of Smyrna and Constantinople, which the Greeks held for some time, and led them and attacked the flank of the Italians at the Kalamos River. We turned the flank and sent the Italians scurrying back into Albania, where the Greek army followed them. Friezes himself riding his horse and surrounded by 4 Jews from Larissa, was killed by an Italian airplane which machine gunned the whole group. In any event, a statue to Friezes, not only 2 statues to Friezes exist in Chalkis. One of them in the Jewish quarter has him riding his horse with a rampant horse, and waving his men on. In any event, Friezes himself was honored, one of the 2 Greeks who were honored by Metaxas, The other one was a foot soldier. But in any event, Chrysis had two small streets named after him in Greece. In any event, his children were allowed to, his sons were allowed to join the youth movement that Metaxas had created, since Jews were not allowed in it. But in any event, his name was honored, if you will, throughout the war, along with other Jews who participated in the resistance. Also, in addition to the approximately 13,000 Jews who were in the Greek army, there were 2,400 Palestinian Jews, among whom were many of the Salonicans who had emigrated after the pogroms of the early 30s, and a number of them volunteered when the British started to raise troops to send to Greece. 2,400 Jews and a small number of a handful, literally, of Arabs who joined as well. In any event, the Greeks chased the Italians into Albania, where they besieged them for over 6 months. Several attempts were made to break out, but the Greeks were sitting on top of the mountains, and the Italians were down in the valleys. All of them suffered from the snows of Albania. And interestingly enough, one of the Jewish doctors who was, there were a number of Jewish doctors with the army, succeeded in using a technique that he had learned in France to treat men with frostbite, as opposed to the normal Greek response to amputate. And so he managed to save many of the soldiers from becoming crippled. And for that he was well honored by Metaxas. In any event, finally, Mussolini led the last attempt to break through, and when that also failed, Hitler initiated his planned response and invaded Greece through Yugoslavia, which itself was in a state of chaos, and managed to break through and reached Salonika on April the 9th of 1942. Now, April 1942. In any event, in May and the Germans then moved south, chasing the British, and along with the Jews who were in the army, south, who fought all the way down to Kalamata, and then the British, in a planned retreat, had ships waiting for them that took them to Crete, where they held out against the Germans for several months. In any event, on May 4th, after the Germans had taken a march to Athens and put their flag up on the Acropolis, the Germans, Hitler then issued his May 4th speech, in which he honored the Greeks for their valor and for the damage they had done to the army. The massive graveyard on the border of the Bulgarian border is filled with German troops who were not able to get through the series of forts that Metaxas had built along the Greek border. And in this his May 4th speech, then he ordered the Greek soldiers to go home. They did not become prisoners of war, and thus the army, in pieces, slowly went home. Many of the soldiers and officers went into the hills, however, in order to keep up some sort of response. The Greek army consisted of two groups of soldiers, of officers, those who were trained by the Germans and those who were trained by the French. The French remained democratic, and many of them had been cashiered, and therefore they provided, if you will, much of the early resistance. And many of the Jews who were there with them either went into the mountains or went back to Salonika, most of them, or to their homes, and many of them, many of the 2,400, if you will, those who didn't become prisoners of war, although some of them did become prisoners of war, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Prisoners of war, and the other ones, the Salonika Jews who went back to Salonika, were deported with their families in 1943. Now, during the war and during the resistance, a number of Jewish doctors were in the mountains, and they set up hospitals under the aegis of Elas, which was the major resistance group. And many of the Jewish girls, or Jewish women, were nurses, many of them quite famous, who worked throughout the war. And also many of the girls also joined the resistance and fought, much like some of the Israeli girls have been fighting in the recent battles in Gaza. So in fact, and the women, mostly the women in Greece, would have been knitting scarves and socks for the soldiers during the Albanian campaign, which helped a lot of them survive, if you will, in the snow. In any event, so the soldiers then split up. Many of them walking home hundreds of kilometers. One group, which was on the Albanian border, was approached by the Germans and told that it was time to surrender. But they spoke German, and none of the Greeks, of course. Most of the soldiers were not familiar with foreign languages. Were approached by one of the soldiers who later became Kapitan Katsos during the resistance, and he explained that the German army wanted them to surrender, and in effect, they did surrender and were not taken into captivity. In any event, Katsos himself began to march home, along with many of the other soldiers. And when he got home, he had learned Greek, German, because he wanted to study to be an engineer. But his father explained to him that the Nazis did not appreciate Jews, and therefore he changed. And he sat down and he decided, he asked a question, he told me, do I become a Catholic or a communist. And then he decided not to become a Catholic and became an active communist. This was already in the mid-30s, and he was involved in the great strike in Kavala of the tobacco workers. But in any event, he immediately went back into the hills, and he joined with EEST, which was slowly beginning to coalesce. It didn't really coalesce into a movement until late in 1942. We'll talk about him a little bit later because he's extremely important as a capitan in northern Thessaly. In any event, Central Greece was eventually under the control of EEST, which was considered to be the Free Greece. The Germans did not go, just like the Ottomans did not go into the mountains, but they controlled the plains and the cities, and in fact tried to keep the people in the mountains, the soldiers who were in the mountains, whether they were Turkish soldiers during the Ottoman period or the Wehrmacht during World War II, tried to keep control of the means of communications, whereas the resistance Andates kept trying to destroy or interrupt the communications as such. The British in 1942 sent in a small group that talked to the two major resistance movements, namely EEST, which was the socialist democratic, if you will, that was headed by Moscow-trained communist leaders, as we find out, and EEST, which consisted of major officers who were mostly of the French training. So in effect, these two groups off and on fought each other during the entire resistance period. In any event, Central Greece was controlled by EEST, and their major concern was to recruit the peasants, if you will, and that was another problem that had to be done, and also to control the means of communication so that their army could move back and forth. And during the early part of the war, Greece was an important transportation route for armament to Crete, which the Germans had taken from the British and from the Cretes, from the remainder of the Cretan soldiers who were in there. Unfortunately, the Cretan division, which had fought in Epirus, was trapped in Greece, and these poor soldiers literally starved to death on the streets of Athens and other cities during the subsequent occupation. In any event, the main transportation then was the railroad that went through Yugoslavia and down through Greece and to the ports, which brought ammunition to Crete and then to North Africa, where the British were hounding the Germans before their eventual conquest. In any event, the British sent in Colonel Edmund Myers, who had been teaching in the British school on Mount in Haifa, and he was sent in to try and get the two resistance groups to assist him to blow up the Gorgopotamus Bridge, which was the main artery as such. Now, the most of the historians at least the ones that write about the Jews, said that there were no Jewish endouties in the Gorgopotamus experience. But in a lecture that I heard in Israel, I met two of the men who had been there, and also there was the grave of at least one Jew at the below the ruins of the Gorgopotamus Bridge today. So in effect, they did take part of that. Myers himself told me that his family was of Jewish origin, that at some point after their arrival in England, the family converted to the main Protestantism. In any event, he succeeded in making a treaty between the two, Eves and Elas, and tried to keep them under control. But he was eventually transferred out, and his second command was the one who found out that Elas was really run by communist trained leaders, and passed that on to the British, who immediately shifted most of their interest and support to Eves, which they talked Zervas, its commander, into was also a Democrat, into a supporter for the return of the king to Greece, which of course Elas did not want, as well as many people did not want. So that became a major problem in the politics of the war, at least amongst the British writers on the period. In any event, the main problem was to organize, if you will, the supply to Elas of food and ammunition. And the British also sent in BLOs, who hundreds of them eventually were scattered around Greece, helping small units. And later the Americans sent in a Greek trained brigade, not a brigade, a small company, to assist the to the resistance. And what's interesting, of course, is the British. Only a few of the British spoke Greek. Famous ones for in the literature, but all of the Greeks that were recruited in the United States spoke Greek, of course, and they were very democratic and supported Elas immensely. Very interesting stories amongst them, and somebody really should write the history. There is a history in the National Archives, but nobody has seen fit to really give them the credit that they had and accomplishments that they did.
Dr. Bowman, and just because of a time issue, I think I'd like to, if it's okay with you.
Let me just continue. Yeah. Let me end then. Let me just end with the well, first of all, in Evia, they set up Elas set up a transport to northern Turkey, which saved about 1,000 Jews. They charged the Jews 1 gold coin, which were happily paid for, and that took them over, and also took a number of Greek leaders out. And there was also a Palestinian Jewish sea captain who took the Greek government uh, out of Greece as such. And in any event, we'll move quickly to the November of November of 1944, which was the end of the resistance period, with the Greeks, with the Germans abandoning Greece finally in November. In August, the Sonderkommando, which was the special group that had to cremate the bodies of the gassed victims who were arriving daily by the thousands, realized that it was time for them to actually revolt. The Germans had already culled half of the Sonderkommando, and so the plans were made for the revolt to come on August the 15th, which was a holiday in which all the guards would be drunk. But that was betrayed by someone, and he was killed. And so it wasn't until October the 7th that the revolt actually took place, which was led, in effect, by the Salonican Jews who were in the Sonderkommando. They succeeded. They succeeded in burning one of the crematoria. There were 4 crematoria in Auschwitz. They burned it, and that led Himmler to stop the massacres. There were roughly about 300 Slavonic and other Greek Jews involved, and those 300, of course, we only have the names of about 30 of them, but they deserve the same kind of honor, if you will, for what they did, even though they were all slaughtered, much like the Greeks at Thermopylae, and they are not mentioned or even remembered, if you will, within the Greek tradition. Also, some of the Greek Jews who had been sent to Warsaw to recycle the ruins of the ghetto joined the Warsaw Revolt, and being trained soldiers, they were able to help immensely, especially after the students who initiated the revolt captured a tank or two. They were able to use that. They were all able to use the heavy weapons that were done, and were able to lead and even raise the Greek flag, which was shown at in the Warsaw Revolt of 1944. So, in effect, the Greek, the Jews in the Greek resistance then were available in all areas, and continued in all areas. Greek Jews also fought in North Africa, and in the Greek Navy, and in the Greek Air Force. But the main body of them were in Dautes in the mountains. And for that matter, I was able to collect a number of their memoirs and retell some of their stories.
Thank you so much for that. As a matter of fact, and I apologize for cutting off the discussion. I think this particular discussion requires also another panel discussion that we will have, because I think this particular history is very important for people to know, because many people don't associate the Greek Jews with the resistance, for example, like you brought up, or some of the tremendous contributions that they have done within the history of Greece, certainly during the Orchidea and post-Orchidea era, certainly in the resistance that you talked about in the mountains. And we're going to have this in more depth in the near future. This is excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Bowman, for that presentation. Our next presenter is Dr. Peter Stavrianidis. Peter Stavrianidis, PhD, is a successful entrepreneur and has served on numerous leadership posts within the Hellenic American community and organizations connected with Hellenic issues of the diaspora and the genocide of Asia Minor. This includes being the past president of the Pan-Pontian Federation of the US and Canada, and being currently the president of the Federation of Hellenic Societies in New Jersey. He has done extensive research in the evolution of Greek America, modern Greek history, and again, as previously mentioned, the Asia Minor genocide. Peter occasionally teaches as an adjunct professor, including at the Fashion Institute of Technology. And Dr. Stavrianidis, more recently, and certainly in his recent research, has been associated with the Pantheon University of Athens, the School of Social and Political Science, and he has been conducting an academic study on the history of the Greek Jews with emphasis in their current situation and challenges they face. In his presentation, he will provide some of the results of his qualitative and quantitative research. Welcome, Peter, and thank you for being with us again. Unmute yourself, Peter. Unmute yourself. Are you having trouble unmuting?
Okay, I'm
Oh,
just trying to get to my PowerPoint.
Okay.
If we can have Constantine help me with that.
Okay, good.
Can you see it?
Costa, do you have his presentation or not?
I just opened from my end.
No, I don't have it. No, you have to click on the share screen icon.
Can you see it?
No.
So click on the share screen icon and then find your PowerPoint presentation and
Uh,
If you want, Peter, just shoot it to Costa and he'll put it up if that works for you.
I have it in.
Can you find it or what?
Yeah, I do have it in front of me, but
there is a share
Okay.
screen icon on the mute application.
okay.
Zoom.
Can you give me the instructions? I do have it, but
There is a share screen icon on the Zoom application. If you click on that, it's gonna open a window with where you can find the PowerPoint presentation. Click on that and then share.
what does it say again? Give me the
It's
instructions.
It's share screen on the Zoom application. Share screen.
Peter, why don't you just forward the presentation to Costa and he'll put it up, okay? You have Costa's email address, right? Marcia, you don't mind if I,
Yeah, why don't you go with Marcia? Yes.
Marcia, I apologize. You don't mind if I just present you a second while we have Peter Peter, if you can, just forward your presentation to Costa. You have his email, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, forward the presentation to him. Marcia, I apologize.
No problem at all.
I'm going to introduce you a second.
Okay.
And again, my apology. Listen, even though I'm going to introduce you, just about everybody knows who you are, but I'll introduce you anyway. Marcia Haddad, Ikonomopoulos, has been the museum director of Kehila, Kedosha, Yanina since 2004 and president of the Association of Friends of Greek Jewry since 1997. As a former educator, writer, editor, and translator, she has dedicated her life to telling the story of Greek Jewry. Marcia was honored to be chosen as a member of the Scholarly Committee for Review, Translation, and Microfilming of the Salonika archives, and compiled the texts and visuals for the website on the Holocaust of Greek Jewry. She has often presented at the Modern Greek Studies Association symposiums. She sits on the board of trustees of Kehila, Kedosha, Yanina, the board of advisors for the Lower East Side Preservation Initiative, the board of Judaic Studies at Queens College, and is a proud member of the American Jewish Committee Cyprus Committee, where she engages in diplomatic outreach. It's a small introduction for someone who does so much for the Greek Jewish community and the Hellenic community in general, in particular, obviously, with the musical things that are done on the Lower East Side. Welcome and thank you for being with us today.
Lou, thank you so much. Really, I'm tired just listening to what I've done. And thinking about what I would talk about today. I looked at the distinguished panel that Elias Katsos put together. Peter Stavrianidis, who has tackled the daunting subject of anti-Semitism in Greece, Professor Bowman, who has been a prolific writer of books on the Jews of Greece, from the Byzantine Empire to the Holocaust, Dr. Cohen, who has spoken frequently on the Jews of Greece eloquently about their struggles and survival. What could I possibly add to this webinar? Because of my position for 20 years now as museum director of Kehila Kedosha Yanina, I have been privileged to assess the accomplishments of Greek Jews as they went into the diaspora. In this case, the New York metropolitan area. This is what I want to contribute to this webinar. Now, we're a day after the January 27th, the International Day of Commemoration of the Holocaust. I want my little contribution to be a reminder of what the world lost and what Greece in particular lost. My presentation is in honor of the memory of Dr. Moses Eliasaf, an example of the contributions of Greek Jewry, a true humanitarian. May his memory be for a blessing. A number of years ago, I had a gathering of 8 of the 11 branches of the Kochimero family, a founding family of Kehila Kedosha Yanina. The patriarch, Jesula, traded in textiles, his total education consisting of enough math to keep his books and spoken Greek to conduct business. His wife, Rachel, has no education at all. In looking out at the over 200 family members gathered, I made note of the number of professors, professionals, architects, teachers, scientists, and attorneys, not only among the men, but also the women. If the Kochimeros immigrants had stayed in Greece, this in all likelihood would not have been possible. In the conservative world of Yanina, women rarely got an education. The Alliance brought them the ability to sew and speak French, certainly not the type of education that would prepare them in the modern world. And most men followed in family businesses, mostly tradesmen. There were very few professionals. In the memorial book that I did of the Jewish community of Yanina, there were a total of 6 professionals among the close to 1,900 Jews that perished in the Holocaust. There were as a rabbi. There was one woman, Shonda, one woman who actually worked. She was a widow. But in general, they were all simple tradesmen with family-owned stores. And then, of course, if they had stayed in Greece, they would have been consumed by the Holocaust. We have heard repeatedly about Colonel Mordecai Frazis and how he exemplified the courage and sacrifice of Greek Jewry during both World War I and World War II, dying on the Albanian front in December of 1940, proudly, gallantly encouraging his troops as he rode on horseback. Here in the United States, we had our own heroic Greek Jews. In World War II, at the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium, 2 Roman Jews, Nisim Addis and Abraham Matzah, sacrificed their lives in battle. Abraham single-handedly held off the advance of German soldiers, saving his whole battalion. Both of them are buried in Agnus-Chapelle Military Cemetery in Belgium. Both Ralph Bettino and Joseph Lafazade were awarded the Purple Heart. Herbert Nachman, son of the past Sisterhood president Ray Nachman, was shot down over Germany. Both Arthur Rubinstein from the David family and Jaime Atun were lost in the Pacific. Most of these Greek Jewish men were sons of immigrants or immigrants themselves. 3 brothers from the Hametz family, Ovadia, Isaac, and Albert, all arriving in the U.S. in 1928, served in World War II. While fighting overseas, they had no idea about the destruction of Greek Jews in the Holocaust. Another brave Greek Jew, Jack Jacobs, family from Yanina, Yaakov, of course, the double name there, distinguished himself in the Vietnam War. In addition to the Medal of Honor, Jacobs received 2 Silver Stars, 3 Bronze Star medals, and 2 Purple Hearts in Vietnam. In his memoir, Jacobs recounts how he had to use subterfuge to return to combat role in Vietnam after being awarded the Medal of Honor, as the military was unwilling to assign Medal of Honor recipients to combat roles. The world has learned of the brilliance of Albert Bourla, CEO of Pfizer, who has been applauded worldwide for helping to develop and distribute the first vaccines for COVID. Albert was born in Thessaloniki, the child of Holocaust survivors, coming to the US in his 30s. When I think of Albert, I think of all those children who were murdered and those who never were born, who could have contributed remarkable things to humanity. Here in the United States, among the founders of Kehila Kedosha, we have a member of the Colchomero family, Esther Colchomero, who will be 105 in February, the only female graduate of Tufts Dental School, who became not only a prominent dentist, a rarity for a woman of her generation, but also a teacher of dentistry. Dr. Laura Mochel, who survived as a hidden child during the occupation, became a prominent physician in New York, and is another example of what could have been lost. And then there's Dr. Joseph Dalvin, his mother was also from the Colchomero family, an example of a man who was able to receive the education here that in the 1930s in Greece, in a conservative Jewish community in Preveza, would have been impossible. The world also would have lost Ray Dalvin, best known as the writer of The Jews of Yanina, but also a translator and playwright, a graduate of NYU, at a time when in a world where a few women would have been encouraged to achieve a higher education. In the field of entertainment, both Sid Ganis, former president of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, family from Yanina, and Hank Azaria, the son of Thessaloniki parents, his mother a publicist for Columbia Pictures, promoting films in Latin American countries, as she was fluent in both English, and Spanish. Okay. There are many more that could have been included. Greek Jews in Greece brought valuable contributions to Greece. As they went into the diaspora, they brought their talents with them. I am often reminded of what we lost and grateful for what survived. Thank you very much for allowing me to present my short presentation.
Marcia, thank you so much for that. And it's so true. It's so true what we've lost, both as a Hellenic community and also a diaspora Hellenic community. And some of the stories that you mentioned today are things that have to be mentioned more than once in other settings, so people could understand the contributions, not only within the Hellenic Republic, but also within the diaspora, and the importance of Hellenic Jews. With that, Peter, are we on? Did you transfer the information, Costa? We got it or no?
Yes, I got it.
Okay. If you can, Peter, unmute yourself, and I'm not going to reintroduce you. All I
Okay.
will say is that you've been a contributor many times, and certainly we welcome this discussion and your quantitative and qualitative analysis with regards to your research on Greek Jews. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. My presentation will contain some historical data just to cover the spaces that were left out. But my emphasis would be, it's a sociological research, so the emphasis would be given to the tiny Jewish community that still remains, and it might be small, but it's very vibrant. So I'm going to start with the I don't know why we're having this problem. Okay, so the question always comes up, why study the Greek Jews? So it is a very unique ethno-religious group with few academic studies so far. Also to discover the degree of anti-Semitism in Greece. And please continue, Costa. And so here we have the second era. The first era was covered very nicely by Dr. Cohen. The second era is the expulsion of Sephardic Jews, which is the overwhelming majority of Jews in Greece today, from Spain and Portugal to places in North Africa, Italy, Northern Europe, but most of them settle in the city of Thessaloniki, or Salonika, as they called it those days. Next, please. So at that particular time, the Ottoman Empire was organized and divided in millets, which were ethno-religious groups. And the most powerful was the Orthodox millet, which is the next slide, please. Costa, can I be in charge of the slides? Do I have that ability? So the most powerful was the Orthodox Christian millet, and the other one was the Armenian. And next slide, please. And of course, the Jewish millet, which was led by the chief rabbi who resided in Istanbul. Next slide, please. And now, here you see those three circles, which is during the 19th and beginning of 20th centuries, were the most, I would say, centers of Judaism in the Ottoman Empire. And we see one is here in Thessaloniki, the other one is Constantinople or Istanbul, and the third one is in Izmir. Those are the three major centers of Ottoman Jews in the 19th, the beginning of 20th century. Next slide, please. Okay, here you can see clearly the percentage of Ottomans who were of the Jewish faith, and we can see that they were about 1.24%. Next slide, please. Also here, we can see clearly the demographics in Thessaloniki during the period 1895-1913, and we can see that the Jews of Thessaloniki actually have the majority. Next one. All right, this is actually, the second era is the expulsion of the Jews from Spain and Portugal. And this is actually the third era. This is the annexation of Thessaloniki by the Greek army. So here we see this phenomenon. We see a cultural phenomenon that in one, actually, as we would say in plain Greek vernacular, that in one night, the Greek Jews, from becoming Ottoman subjects, they became Greek citizens with all the privileges. Next one, please. And I'll just go through quickly and just going to add something I think very important about the personality of Mordechai Frisis. Now, Frisis participated as an officer in the Asia Minor campaign, and he was actually captured, as many other Jewish soldiers. Now, the community of Smyrna paid the army, the Turkish army, paid ransom money for those Jewish soldiers to be set free. At the time, Mordechai Frisis, I believe he was either a lieutenant or captain, he refused to be freed by the Turkish army. And he remained with his soldiers until the end of war. And I mean, that shows clearly his loyalty and his ethos as an officer in the Greek army. Next one, please. Okay, here we can see the horrific event of the Holocaust and the tremendous percentage of Greek Jewry that perished. And of course, that's also something, it's a topic that we can spend a whole conference. What contributed to that? And let's go to the next one, please. So if you can see that Thessaloniki lost 94%, it's tremendous. And you know, there's different schools of thought that with different theories that claim that what contributed to this tremendous percentage of losses. And there could be, we can go to the next one. This is the picture, a photo of the Greek Jews that participated in the resistance forces. Next one, please. So, although in some places, especially Thessaloniki, the losses were tremendous, and as I said before, we can dedicate one of our future gatherings and analyze the contributing factors that made this such a high percentage. And of course, there's a school of thought that says that it was the anti-Semitism that existed at the time in Thessaloniki because of the antagonism. And of course, historically, we can go back when, with the exchange of the population, when the Greeks from Asia Minor came to Thessaloniki, from the beginning, there was an antagonism. The antagonism was commercial, and it was cultural, and it was religious. So we can spend a lot of time discussing it. I'm somewhere in between because I know the leadership of the Jews of Thessaloniki wasn't right with Rabbi Zvi Goretz, who is a person that I believe with his naivete, for lack of a better word, contributed to this destruction. Also, we have to, as a sociologist, I have to take under consideration the fact that from 1912, 1913, that the Jews of Thessaloniki became part of the contemporary Greek nation, didn't give enough time not to assimilate, but to integrate. So it was very easy for the Jews of Thessaloniki to be discovered. And of course, their denial to join the partisan forces, the dedication to the family because they didn't want to leave the elderly behind, their lack of leadership, as I said from the beginning. And I can't say the anti-Semitism, but there was definitely an apathy from their Greek compatriots during those difficult times, which was different than other parts of Greece. And a brilliant, bright example is in the island of Zakynthos, where we see the bravery of the mayor and the bishop working together to save the 275 Jews of Zakynthos. Next one, please. And of course, the contribution of Archbishop Damaskinos. Next one. That worked with the Angelos Evert, who was the head of the Athens branch of the city police, and they distributed fake IDs to Greek Jewish citizens and saved them from exile and, of course, from the concentration camps. So these shows a different picture. And of course, when you see a hierarch, the archbishop, who doesn't lose, he doesn't want to lose another Jewish compatriot. And of course, if you compare that to some religious leaders in the rest of Europe that either didn't do anything or remained silent throughout this ordeal, this one of the biggest crime of world history. So I think that contributes to us as a moment of bravery as a moment where the Greek hierarchs showed their feelings to save their Jewish compatriots. Next one, please. And over here we see modern Greece. We see there's about 5,000 to 5,500 Greek Jews. Next one. And, you know, me as an academic researcher, the hypothesis that I was working was that where the Greek Jewish community is diminishing, the Greek Jewish community is not fully accepted by the Greek homogeneous society, anti-Semitism exists on the rise in Greece and in Europe. A majority of Greek Jews view Israel as their historic and spiritual motherland. Greek Jews are fully acculturated, but mostly not assimilated. Greek Jews are unique as compared to other European and American Jews. That's how I started my research. Next one, please. And of course, I used a mixed method design, which consisted of quantitative data and qualitative, with questionnaires and semi-structured interviews. And I used a professional statistician to help me with the statistics. Next one, please. So I used 175 subjects for the questionnaires, and 82% had at least a bachelor's degrees, which shows that the Greek Jews are very well educated. But also there's the other thing, that 66% from the subjects that I distributed the questionnaires were married to a Jewish person, as opposed to 66% were married, of which 63% married to a Jew. In other words, 37%, almost a third, were married to a non-Jew. Next slide, please. Here is about the identity. Do you think of yourself? Most of them responded, I think myself as a Greek Jew or a Jew of Greek descent. Next one. Overwhelming majority, 96%.
Peter, I'm sorry. Can we go back to the other slides? You know, if we can, just just to give the audience a chance to look at this, because this is kind of interesting.
Yes. The first slide is which of the following best describes your identity? 12% says I am a Jew. 33% said I am a Greek Jew. 8% I'm a Jew living in Greece. So these are important as you're doing a sociological research. And 47% said I'm a Greek of the Jewish faith. Okay. So
thank you, Peter.
Okay, and the next one says, do you think of yourself as an Orthodox Jew? These are categories.
Yes, it's Stephen Bowman
Speaking.
These are.
Larry Capino, case number from Dr. Joe Valio.
Ah, yes, Larry.
Yeah, if
Fine.
you can.
I'm just doing the.
These are categories that
Hold on a second, Peter.
Yes.
Let Stephen just go. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
These are categories, the second part, that you usually would ask an American Jew. But because the overwhelming majority of the Greek Jews.
Right, what can I do for you?
I'm sorry, Peter. Costa, can you mute Dr. Bowman? Is that possible? Costa. Costa, are you around? I guess not. Okay, I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
That's okay. So anyway, the overwhelming majority of the Greek Jews as opposed to American Jews are secular Jews. So that was only 1% said they're Orthodox, but I'm not sure that they understood exactly if we were to put them in the same category. It's the American Jews. So let's go to the next one. All right, so you see here that 96% associate socially with their Christian Greek compatriots. So they are integrated, okay, but not assimilated, and I'll explain that later. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay, so here the first one. Do you think that anti-Semitism is currently a serious problem in Greece? So 51%, somewhat of a problem, and 43%, very serious problem. Okay, so the majority, overwhelming majority, believe that anti-Semitism exists. And then we can go to this statistics here. More than half experience at least a moderate amount of anti-Semitism on this one. And the last one, more than half think anti-Semitism will increase, which we have seen that. And we see that as we speak right now. We see it in Europe, and we see it right here in the United States of America. And it has increased tremendously. And of course, what triggered that? Of course, we know what triggered that. Let's go to the next one, please. All right, these are the Jewish organizations. Now, my research is based on two theoretical frames. And of course, one is the Berry's theory of acculturation and the revival theory. So for the Jews of Greece, the Greek Jews, to belong to organizations like this, the more they participate, the more the revival theory is in order. Let's go to the next one, please. So here is a quick comparison between the 5,000 to 5,500 Jews living in Greece to the 7.6 million. And these are the latest statistical showings. So and let's go to the next one. Okay, I think we covered this one. Let's go to the next one. All right, here's something which is very interesting. Let's take the Jewish Americans here. Almost 50%. Here it says 45%. It's almost 50%, according to the Institute for the Jewish Policy Research. 2023 are having an intermarriage. But of course, we have 7 million. But having 5,000, 37% is the percentage is high. And the other day, when I attended, I was asked by Beatrice, actually, and I said, look, I don't have the statistical data of let's say, of the Greek Jews, but if I were to take a calculated shot in the dark, and I discussed it with my statistician, if there's no revival happening, which is happening now, I'm happy to see, and we can discuss it during our panel discussion, in 30 years, if they continue with the same, because every time there's an intermarriage, and we see that with the Greek America here, and I've done studies with Greek America with statistics, it would not exist. It will not exist anymore. So let's go to the next one, please. And here we can compare with intermarriage with other countries. United States, 45%, Germany, 46%, Hungary, 55%, Russia, Russia is the highest, 63%. Okay, next one, please. Okay, so one of the questions was attachment to Israel. How close are you feel attached to Israel? Jewish Greeks, very close, 55%. Jewish Americans, 30%. Have you ever been to Israel? Jewish Greeks, 92% have been to Israel, as opposed to American Jews, 43%. Okay, next one. All right, so these are the interview results. As I said, about 175 questionnaires were distributed, and I personally interviewed at least 40 people and semi-structured interview. Next one, please. Go ahead, more. Yeah, okay, as you see, these were some of the hypotheses that I started to study. Most of the interviews felt they were a minority in Greece, but not marginalized. Who are marginalized? The Muslims in France. They're marginalized, most of them. Okay, they have their own communities and they're completely marginalized. Fear of increasing anti-Semitism. Well, yeah, 96%, they do have that fear of but they feel safe. They feel safe. And somebody told me, a very prominent, he's a very good friend of mine too, you met him too. He said, you know something? I don't have my luggage ready to go. Δεν έχω τη βαλίτσα μου έτοιμη. That means that they, so far, although there's acts of anti-Semitism, thank God, we haven't seen any violence, any physical violence. I think the intermarriage is the biggest concern. Most of the people that I spoke to, I went to the central community of Athens, Thessaloniki, Corfu, etc. The biggest concern, and of course it's something, the more the society is free, the more a society is multicultural, guess what? You're going to have more intermarriages. The same thing is happening with Greek America. And the other fear is the secularization of the new generation. Most of the interviews felt that the Greek Jewish community needs to maintain its Jewish identity, culture, and values. Next one, please. Next one. Costa. Costa. Okay, so as I said before, this research is based on basic acculturation model and cultural revival theory. The cultural, quickly, I'm going to say quickly because of the limited time. The cultural revival theory, it's something that we have seen in the past few years. One of them was the mayor of Thessaloniki contributed to that, Yannis Poutaris. The museum, the cultural museum in Thessaloniki and in Athens, the excellent relations between Greece and Israel, that of course has contributed to the revival theory. The Aristotle University has also studies, Jewish studies, which is you can get a degree on Jewish studies, and the Berry's acculturation model revised. I used it mostly for the Sephardic Jews because they didn't have enough time. One of the reasons I believe that contributed to the tremendous loss that they had in Thessaloniki mostly was that they didn't have enough time to acculturate and integrate. And I'm not saying assimilate. You don't have to assimilate. Many Greek Americans, they have not assimilated. You become fully assimilated when you also take the religion of the dominant society. So the Jews have maintained their religion. They're not that religious, they're secular, but they have maintained their religion. So they didn't have to go through a complete assimilation. But at this point, I can say they're fully acculturated and integrated. And I will finish right here and we'll continue with the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, for that. When is this information going to be available for people to look at it in more depth and analyze it, whatever?
Well, I've been sitting on it for years now, so I have enjoyed doing the presentations. I've done quite a few in this country and in Greece under the auspices of the AJC, the American Jewish Committee, Jewish Federations. But hopefully I can submit it to the Pantheon University, hopefully this year. I will invite you and all of you, whoever can be there. It will be an honor. So most likely it will published on academia.edu, so you will all have access to it. So it contains a lot of historical data. You must have that. It's in English. And of course, the statistical data, which I went through fast, it's much more involved. It gives you a picture, realistic picture of what is happening with the small but vibrant Greek Jewish community in Greece right now, and what is their future? What is their future?
Thank you, Peter. I think their future, quite frankly, is going to be fantastic. If everybody just unmute yourselves, it's an open discussion.
I have a comment to make.
Okay, go ahead, Marcia.
Okay. One thing that you brought up that I think is very important is the status of Greek Jewry, whether they're diminishing in number. I am constantly inundated by Greek Jews in this country that would like to claim dual citizenship.
Yes.
And we run into problems that Christians do not run into. Okay, we don't have baptismal certificates. Proof of birth has to be from the municipal archives, which I have on my computer. But, like for instance, an example from the Colchomero family. The first Colchomero came over. Colchomero was a nickname, Kakamera, someone who was very picky and saying the prayer, at the beginning of Passover, and very picky and separating his fabrics. The actual family name was Mattathias. The first Colchomero that came over as Elias Mattathias. But then afterwards, not legally, just took on the name of Colchomero, the rest of the family. This is very difficult to document. I have that he was listed in the municipal archives. I run into constant problems. Marriage? We don't get married in a church. They won't accept the ketubah. So, these are all technical problems that should be put aside. If someone feels so strongly about their Greek identity and want to claim dual citizenship, I think the consulates all over the United States should make concessions to it.
Yes.
Listen. Let me jump into this, because this is one of the things that annoys me. I have to be quite frank with you, Marcia, because this concept of dual citizenship is problematic for everyone. Okay, probably for the Jews, maybe more so than others. But we're going to have, for example, a panel discussion with the adoptees, the 4,000 children that were adopted in the United States who are now trying to become dual citizens. They were born in Greece, etc. And again, they're having similar problems with the Hellenic government. The Hellenic government also has problems with giving dual citizenship to people who were born in Greece and came over. And the Constitution, the Greek Constitution, is supposed to guarantee that anyone who's Greek, and the Greek Jews are Greek. Let me say this again. The Greek Jews are Greek. And they should be, in fact, they should bend over backwards to make sure that everyone who associates with being Greek, born in Greece, descended from Greeks, has the ability to be a dual citizen. This annoys me. I have to be honest, and I apologize for raising my voice. This annoys me tremendously. I was born in Greece. I came here as a child. My parents were Greek, etc. It took me 10 years to get dual citizenship for someone who was born in Greece. Ridiculous. Now, I have contacts, obviously. I could have made it done in a few months, but I wanted to go through the process to see how long it would take. So finally, I said, you know what? I'm going to take my time. I'm going to do it. But this has to be a different discussion that we have to have with adoptees, with Jewish Greeks, with people who are born in Greece, with people who are born in the United States and claim dual citizenship. This is a very important subject. My apology. My apologies for jumping in.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You know, I had the privilege to sponsor a lot of students in medicine, of course, for PhDs. And I'm going to tell you point blank, don't sit on this material, because the moment it starts getting a little old and stale, you lose your strength. And for this matter, when your study was conducted, what year?
No, that's a very good point, Mimi. I update the material. It's only a couple of years. It's not that old.
The reason I'm saying that is
because, and let me try to answer your question. And this consists, thank God, it consists of younger and older, like we're talking, let's say, anti-Semitism. The younger people haven't encountered something like this. The older people, I remember once I had a discussion with you, and you have served in the Greek army as an officer. If I remember correctly, you told me that, right?
Navy.
Okay, there's the same thing. The armed forces. The Navy might be a little different, but I've met people of your age, my age, who have encountered in the Greek army, maybe the Greek Navy, but the incidents of anti-Semitism. But just to go back for a second to what Lou was saying before, what is happening, again, this is a sociological phenomenon, and we can explain that. Like, let's say, the Greek Jews and the Greek Christians come to the United States in the beginning, in the 20s, they were very close, especially with the Romaniote Jews. But then of course, they grew to be apart. And I think that contributes to 2 or 3 generations of Greek Jews that don't really care to become Greek citizens. So this is something that we have to discuss. I think we have a very progressive church here. It's much different than Greece. And I think we can start this movement, if you will, and to facilitate someone who wants to pursue the dual citizenship, to be able to do it quickly without any problems. And Lou, I suggest we have a special meeting with our Consul General. He's a very sensitive guy, Dean Constantinou, I believe, and I'm sure that he can contribute to that.
Listen. I had a panel discussion a few years ago, as you know, having to do with dual citizenship. It was a couple of years ago, and we had thousands of people who listened to that particular panel discussion because people were frustrated, totally frustrated with the inability, guaranteed by the Hellenic Constitution, not to be able to get their Hellenic citizenship. We'll continue the discussion. If you can, Stephen, please unmute yourself, because this is an open discussion. Stephen, unmute yourself. Yeah. So the answer is yes. I agree with Marcia, by the way. This thing, I'm glad you brought this up. This is a big deal because let's say you're a Greek Jew and you're saying to yourself, hey, listen, I'm a Greek Jew. That's my religion. I'm Jewish. but I'm Greek. Why can't I get dual citizenship that's guaranteed by the Constitution? And Marcia's correct. They require certain information that obviously, if you're a Greek Jew, you don't have. You weren't baptized. Okay, that's nonsense. So we have, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mimi. I'm sorry.
Let me jump into this.
Yes.
The Spaniards solved the problem a decade ago. They are now giving, and the Portuguese, they are now giving citizenship for people that were expelled 500 years ago, and
Okay.
they have no documentation. Maybe sometimes their family name denotes the village or the town they came from. But all I'm saying is this discussion should not be handled in this level. You're doing well to raising it up, but this is a discussion. And let's face it, I was born in Greece. I have a lot of, primarily all my friends are Christian. I have some Jewish friends. I really, growing up, did not feel anti-Semitism, which now is rampant. And it's rampant, undercovered because of Israel or whatever, but
Yeah.
there is always an excuse. Growing up, it was totally different. I was in a public school, which means there were not all rich kids and whatever. I was in medical school, same thing. When you mentioned I went to the Navy, actually, the day I presented myself, there is this officer saying, you know, you cannot become an officer because you are Jewish. And I said, what are you talking about? My father was an officer. He fought in Albania. He got a medal in Albania. And you're telling me that I cannot become. So, and the story is now public. So I called a friend of mine who called the superior. And an hour later, this guy calls me and he says, why did you have to complain? I say, I have to complain because you were not doing your job. And he says, I profoundly apologize. This rule was for Muslims only. And not only I became an officer, but I became an officer in the Navy. Of course, right now things are changing. Because they only serve for 9 months or a year, they don't become officers across the board. But for the record, yes, there was much less anti-Semitism.
Okay.
A second point that I want to go with your presentation, because it's really a very good one, and I urge you to put it up. You are talking about intermarriages. There is much more than you think. And then the question comes, if you look at the names of the young girls that get their bat mitzvahs every summer in the synagogue in Athens, it's more than 50-50. Christian names, Jewish names, whatever. It's fine. This is what's going to happen, we like it or not. With 5,000 Jews in Greece, there is revival. So did my late good friend Moises Elisaf in Yanina, who took a synagogue empty and he filled it. But this is okay. It's not the end of the world. It's not going to change the course, because right now, even there are in the United States, and you very nicely showed this out, Jews call themselves conservative, Orthodox. There is not such thing like Greek Jews, Orthodox. It's called traditional. And the explanation of the former rabbis is that's how we found it, that's how we can continue. But there is not the Orthodox, strict Orthodox that you see in the United States. And I hate to say, but those are primarily Jews from Eastern Europe rather than Jews from more inclusive parts, the South of
Mimi, I love how it
Mimi.
was explained to me. Do you work on the Shabbat? Yes, I have to work on
Of
the
course.
Shabbat. Do you keep kosher? Well, we try, but not always. Can the women come down from the balcony? No, we're Orthodox. So that's the last bastion of Orthodoxy, is the women in the balcony.
Well, I fought with that in Athens, and I fought with that in Yanina, and you know how it is. But at the end of the day, if we're going to focus on Judaism, it is very important to stress and not to sugarcoat. There in Thessaloniki, yes, they were not prepared. They didn't even speak Greek. The older generations only speak Ladino. So that was a problem. The come of the Greeks were expelled from Asia Minor was a big problem because there was competition. But in specific areas, Thessaloniki included, there was a lot of anti-Semitism. They jumped in the properties. They still have not acknowledged. I was talking to Marcia the other day, and I said that through my daughter, there is a man in Germany who started the campaign to put these little stones of memory, if you have seen. And the way he started was that he was a graduate of a school in Thessaloniki. So he was looking at the archives, and he saw in the archives for the years 42, 43, a big number of people that the book says did not graduate. They didn't say that they were killed or anything else. So he pushed, and he was lucky because Boutaris was the mayor. And if you go now outside the school, there are these stones. Wherever you go in Europe, you will see stones commemorating that this was a house. I had asked the late mayor, and he had agreed, but he said, let's wait a couple of years in my mayorship to put not to my father's home, but to the Alliance, in the sidewalk where the Jewish school was, in the sidewalk which, by the way, next to it was a synagogue that was ruined and destroyed. So they don't even want to do that because the one group says, well, if we put that, then maybe you're going to come and claim ownership. No, we're claiming history. And the history, you can fake it as much as you want, is there. So as a conclusion, as far as I'm concerned, where I'm putting my efforts is to make sure that people, because of course, history is written by the winners, but history, the true analysis of history, that's where we should focus. And when Marcia says that here's a family only that because they came to the States and they were given the opportunity, this is what happened. There are 100, 200 people. I have a very moving story, and I'm going to close it. Since yesterday was Memorial Day, so there is the story of this woman from Veria that saved this family, and very poor, but still she was sharing with them herbs and milk and whatever. They end up in Israel. Some years ago, they flew her to Israel. And it was so moving to see the older Greek lady in her wheelchair, and around her, there are, again, 200 people, and they all say, thank you. One person saved and became 200. In Greece, it's the opposite. In Greece, instead of increasing, we reduce ourselves. We leave Greece, and I'm an example. But, you know, we cannot stop the wheels of the future, and everybody has his own views. Thank you.
I just want to say something on that, Mimi. Very nice. That in this revival, I think the Greek Jews of the diaspora can contribute to that. One of the few people, or the only people that I know is doing that, is Marcia. You know, because maybe I'm missing something, but I don't see anybody else doing that. So the reason, many times people ask me, how come you embarked on such a difficult journey? Because it's and that's why it's taking me long to present it. Because listen to this, Mimi. 5 or 6 times I have requested, and Marcia can attest to that, to be a speaker as a researcher, as an academic researcher in the annual event that takes place at the Hebrew Union College. And for many different reasons, I was not accepted. And I'm a pretty good speaker, and
I'm not going to get into politics. Talk
Yeah,
to the
yeah, don't get
council
into politics.
But again,
because there would be probably a couple of truths that would be said in a scientific way. Now, the other thing is, I was born in Athens, and I went to high school, but then I spent another 20 years in New York. And because of my business, I'm in touch with Jews from all over the world. So that gives me a little bit of another right to speak about Jews. I met Jews from Russia. 2 of my employees are Russian Jews. And sometimes I have to explain to them about certain Jewish holidays. They don't know, or they didn't know. And I decided to embark on this research on my own without being funded by any institution, although I was approached because I wanted to be free. And to do a quantitative day, to get quantitative and to do the interviews, that takes time. And it takes persuasion to get people to trust you and sit with you. So it took me a couple of years just for the Jewish organization to accept me. And of course, because I'm very well known in the homogenia, it wasn't difficult for me to embrace me. But it took me 2 or 3 years to do that.
I will say, Peter, I will say one thing, okay? I built Hebrew Union College, which everyone went to. I will say that. And also the other thing for everybody who's listening, that actually we the steel that we put in will allow another 2 floors to be added on if in the future they want to expand Hebrew Union College. With that, what I'd like to do is just close the discussion, because we've gone for over 2 hours, but it doesn't matter. So I'll start with each presenter and just give us some of your final thoughts. Mimi, some of your final thoughts about the discussion.
I enjoyed very much the discussion and every aspect of the discussion, but I want to close with a pitch, since Peter challenged me. If you want to put an asterisk and a good chapter on the revival, come to Yanina for Yom Kippur and have your tape recorder and get some live information from Greek Israelis and others that come, and the feeling, what it means to be there. I cannot describe it. I showed some pictures and you saw my face. It's not about believing. It's about going to your roots. So I would say, mark your calendar. It is the beginning of October. Bring your friends also, because Marcia will attest that a lot of Christians, including academicians, university professors, and others, come and were during when Elisaf was alive, they would join. So that is the key. Bring also non-Jews so that you expose them. Thank you.
Dr. Bowman, some final thoughts on today's panel discussion?
It was an impressive performance. And I thank you for putting it together as such. I'm basically a library researcher, and I've traveled to Greece and Israel and elsewhere throughout Europe, picking up information, but it's all about the earlier periods. And I lived in Greece several times for several years. But I just remember at a conference that we had at Ohio State some years ago. A friend of mine was a Greek priest, and he was there. And I told him, that I was interested in the question of intermarriage, because I'd met some women in Cleveland, Jewish women who had married Greeks. And when I went to the Panelists in the summer, sometimes I met people who were also intermarried. And so I asked him what he thought of that as a priest, given the fact that I'd studied Byzantium and knew that that any Jew who succeeded in marrying a girl from the Yenisseia had to leave the country, or else they would have been killed probably. So that's why many of these Greek seamstresses and trained in the purple dye and sewing, wound up in Egypt, which was the main center of Jewish textiles for a period of time. And he says, "Don't tell me about it. This is my son married a Jewish girl."
Love it.
That's
So
a great story.
in effect, love conquers all barriers. And I've met many Greeks, and many Jews, and this interlinking, between the two oldest diasporas in the world. We're not talking about the Chinese, but in the Western world, these are the two basic diasporas which succeeded, in living in their own country, speaking their ancient language, and doing all the things they did in the ancient world, which is basically killing each other or arguing with each other, which is the normal way of interacting with other people to strengthen your own identity. But the point is that they're all healthy. They should remain healthy, and they should not be attacked.
Absolutely,
by
absolutely.
the enemy.
Thank you, Stephen. Peter, some final thoughts?
Well, before I give my closing statement, I just want to.
What's a final thought? Not closing statement.
I just want to inform my friend Mimi that I went to Canada a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, just to visit the mayor, just before he passed away, and to personally invite him to come to the States. And this way we can offer him a forum to speak and to honor him. So I did that. And plus, I've gone to so many other, Marcia can attest to that, to so many times to the kosher restaurant with my friend Rabbi Gabe and I forget his name, but Haddad. And so
Mendel, or Hendel Mendel.
I've done Mendel, and I've done my rounds. Believe me, I paid a lot of dues, more so than when I was doing my PhD. I take it very seriously. But the scope of my study is to enlighten and induce the contemporary Greek political leaders and educators to include the existence of these so important ethno-religious minority in its historical narrative, something that doesn't exist as it should be right now. Also to help diminish or possible eradicate anti-Semitism, usually based on false and predisposed data among the non-Jewish citizens of contemporary Greece vis-a-vis this tiny minority. Moreover, to emphasize their contribution to the Greek modern state, their valiant participation fighting the fastest invaders during World War II, and their unprecedented suffering and loss of life during the Holocaust. That's my intention with this paper, which is about 200 pages. It's not too long.
Thank you, Peter. Marcia, some final thoughts?
Okay, just two final thoughts. when you talk about the community here in New York, the Romano Jews at Kehila, Kedosha, we are the exception to the rule. They strongly feel their Greek identity. Many of them continue to speak Greek in this generation. Many go to school to learn Greek if they didn't grow up with it. And they are proud of who they are. They're proud to be Greek. They're proud of their distinctive liturgy. And of course, they're all Americans. But this is the difference. We have a very close relationship with the Archdiocese in New York. We get a private audience, by the way, with an incoming archbishop and regular visits afterwards. Epidophoros is in Thessaloniki now. I would like to feel that his exposure to Greek Jewry in the United States is the reason he chose to go over there for the commemoration of the Holocaust in Thessaloniki. One other final thought. I have been involved in the study of Greek Jewry for close to 40 years now. I have repeatedly heard, that's it, next year, Yanida won't be around. It's going to disappear. We're stubborn people. We're not going anywhere. Not in New York and not in Greece. And the only thing is, if you give in, it's all over with. I look at our synagogue. We were the 404th synagogue on the Lower East Side. There are only 3 that are remaining. They either all merged or they all left. We never gave up hope here. And I feel the same with Greek Jewry. Once they give up hope, it's all over. We will continue.
Well, Marcia, you are going somewhere. You're going to get. We're going to push this dual citizenship thing.
Oh, great! I want mine.
I tried to open up the scenario because the Hellenic Jewish community is and was and remains a strong integral part of Hellenic history and the nation's identity. So it's extremely important to do that. Thank you all for being a part of this fascinating discussion. Great panel. Something we have to continue, by the way. Something we have to continue. To the audience. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you so much.
To the audience, our next panel discussion is in a couple of weeks. It's on the legacy of a great international statesman, Yannis Kapodistrias, on his anniversary. Thank you to the audience. Thank you again to the panelists for a wonderful and very important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you.
Take care, guys.